Good morning and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation in Fullerton, California, an inclusive community dedicated to building a better world. I am Dale Botts. Whoever you are, however you identify, whether you join us in person or online, you are welcome. UUCF acknowledges that this land that we inhabit in Orange County is physically situated on the original ancestral homelands of the Achamin, Kizh, and Tongva peoples. We pay respect and honor these and all indigenous people. As we begin our service, I'd like to call your attention to a few brief announcements. Christina Garner will be leading a Spirit of Charles Dickens walking tour on Thursday, December 12th at 4 p.m. The cost is $20. Actually, it's a contribution. The proceeds will support our music program here. Sign up at uufullerton.org/Dickens. Judy Hertz is looking for some ringers to learn a chime piece for Christmas Eve. No previous experience is necessary. The first of 2 rehearsals is this Wednesday at 6 p.m. Talk to Judy if you're interested. Judy is sitting right near the front here on my left. Our Zoom drop-in support group meets online Saturday, December 7th at 12:30 p.m., led by Karen Anderson. Don't let this hectic season get you down. On Sunday, December 15th, with a musical service featuring uplifting messages and the songs associated with the holiday season, we will explore good tidings that Unitarians historically promoted. Our guest talk, or as some say, guest sermon, is a collaboration between Rose London and me. I have seen Rose in a number of theater events around Southern California during one of our UUCF worship service planning meetings. She volunteered to read a sermon if someone else wrote it. In the sermon today, I speak to the suppressed history of indigenous people in California, based on an article in the investigative journal, The Nation. The article by Julian Brave Noisecat, called "We Are Still Here," was published in February 2022. The sermon weaves in several thoughts related to civil discourse with ritual celebration versus an authoritarian culture. One thought is that indigenous people have creative approaches such as ritual celebrations to maintaining their connection to each other and the land that they live on. Another thought is that RUU values amplify creative approaches, provide rituals like the holiday season celebration when the daylight is the shortest, and separately, the bread communion. UU ritual and values seem to provide a template to understand how not to be an authoritarian. A primary source for the latter is an article about the corruption of democracy published in the UU World. Today, we weave into this Sunday service both of the following UU rituals: the holiday season celebration and separately the bread communion. The bread communion will occur after the sermon. If you brought bread, you can put it on the cart near the Christmas tree here, and we will do that after the sermon. We'll be sharing joys and sorrows a little bit later in the service. If you're in the sanctuary if you'd like to share a joy and sorrow, the slips are located on the back table, and you may fill them out up to the end of the time for all ages. If you're joining us online, I invite you to post your joy or sorrow in the comments section, as well as saying hello. Now, please take a moment to greet each other.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody. So lovely to see everyone. The decorations look beautiful. For our opening hymn, we'll be singing hymn number 1010, We Give Thanks. Please rise in mind, body, or spirit and join us in singing.
Oh, we give thanks for this precious day, for all gathered here and those far away, for this time we share with love and care. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day. Let's sing again. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day, for all gathered here and those far away, for this time we share with love and care. Oh, we give thanks for this precious one more time. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day, for all gathered here and those far away, for this time
Authoritarians talk about inevitability, us versus them, and a mythic past. They demonize and delegitimize institutions like academia, the press, and the courts. Through propaganda and disinformation, authoritarians create stories that make it appear nothing is believable. Their stories are not designed to convince or persuade. They're designed to jam any meaningful discussion. In our response, we all get the urge to freak out. Do not allow yourself to amplify their false narratives, cycling between fear and giving up. We must stay steady and focused on our progressive values, our values of justice, equity, transformation, pluralism, interdependence, love, and generosity must remain our reference to calm any responses. The path to a more equitable, just, and pluralistic society is by proving the truth using love and generosity. It can be a long path, like the arc of justice. The indigenous people, for example, are still here in spite of indignities and barriers to their survival and well-being. Although authoritarians won the election, we must remain vigilant and keep referencing our values. We must recognize authoritarian tactics and be careful not to ride the roller coaster of fear and us versus them. Now I invite Rose to light the chalice. Please join me in saying our unison affirmation. This flame affirms light of truth, the warmth of community, and the fire of commitment. Love is doctrine that we share. The crest of truth is our sacrament, and service is our prayer. To live together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve human need. Thus do we covenant with one another. The placing of candles upon a circle of evergreens is an age-old tradition. Lighting additional candles each day or week as the light wanes has been part of human rituals for centuries. We are warmed by the glow. We are reminded that the wheel of the season will turn and brilliant lengthening days will return. The circle of evergreens reminds us that life and love will never end. We light candles each week during the holiday season celebration with anticipation, as we know a new season will soon be here. Then days will become longer, and we know the warmth of the candles will soon be replaced by the warmth of the sun. Week 1 is hope. The first Advent candle is the candle of hope. Hope is the motivating force that forces us, or the motivating force that moves us through times of despair. The days are getting shorter, the weather colder, the nights longer. Hope tells us that the longer days ahead, that new life will emerge, and that we need to hold on just a little longer. We light the candle of hope, as Rose just did, as part of our holiday season celebration or ritual. Now is a time the children are invited to come forward for the time for all ages.
From you I receive, to you I give. Together we share, and from this we live. From you I receive.
Good morning, friends. Today is bread communion. As you can see, we're going to have some of that yummy bread later in the service. So today our story is about why we celebrate bread communion, and it's called The Marvelous Loaves by Beryl Ashenber, and I'm Joy, by the way. Grandpa Allen is a member of the Nottingham Unitarian Church. When he is asked about his bread recipe, he simply says the secret ingredient is love. Grandpa Allen always bakes one loaf of bread for the church's annual bread communion, like we have today. The children and adults wonder every year how one loaf of bread is going to feed the multitudes of the congregation. But then Grandpa Allen begins cutting the loaf with the bread knife, and as if by magic, the bread multiplies into 20 loaves. It's a miracle, someone calls out. Don't be ridiculous, Grandpa says. It's a mathematical principle. The youth group was planning to serve food at a soup kitchen on the following Saturday, and during the coffee hour, they asked Grandpa Allen if he would bring a loaf of bread to feed the hungry. He agreed and met the youth at the soup kitchen with a homemade loaf of bread. There were very many hungry people, and as Grandpa Allen cut the bread, it just kept multiplying and multiplying more and more. Well, a secret like that doesn't last long, so Grandpa Allen and the bread were featured on the 6 o'clock news, which is how the town sheriff, yes, the sheriff of Nottingham, learned about the marvelous loaves. He was not a nice person. In fact, he was a bully to those around him, and when he saw the news, he knew that he had to get his hands on that loaf of bread. The magical bread would bring a lot of money, and he loved money. So the sheriff went to Grandpa Allen's home and offered, then bargained, then threatened in order to get a loaf of the bread. Grandpa Allen refused. He said, "You just don't understand," he said. "It won't work for you. Nothing personal, but there is a mathematical principle at work here." The sheriff wouldn't take no for an answer. He pushed past Grandpa Allen and into the kitchen, took a whole loaf of bread, and returned to his home as fast as he could. So he stole Grandpa Allen's bread. That's not nice. The sheriff of Nottingham then, when he got home, started cutting the bread, dreaming of the riches it would bring him. But the bread didn't multiply. It was dividing into slices and pieces and crumbs, and the crumbs began dividing again and again and again into smaller and smaller until nothing of the bread was left. And just as Grandpa Allen had told everyone who asked, a sound mathematical principle controlled the bread, and it was this: hate divides, but love multiplies. So that's our little story for today to remember as we're enjoying our lovely bread communion today. So thank you. So the kids, we can stay in here, but if we can also go to the Chapman Lounge a little bit and hang out until we get the yummy bread.
Go with wisdom, go with wonder, go to meet a brand new day. Learn to see the light within you as we send you on. Go with wisdom, go with wonder, go to greet a brand new day. Learn to see the light within you as we send you on your way.
Wow, that's interesting. Okay, is this mic on? Not yet. Ah, I think that's on. All right. Good morning.
Good morning.
So I'm just going to do a quick board update for you. We've been meeting every 2 weeks, sometimes every week, to try and get our hands around everything that we want to get accomplished this board term. So I'm going to give a little budget update, and this is from Colleen, who is our treasurer, but she's not in town right now. So I just wanted to update you on the audit that we had, the 2-year look back. That was completed by our bookkeeper, and we do have a full-time bookkeeper now, or part-time bookkeeper, I mean. As stated in earlier reports, there's no unaccounted for expenditures and no theft of funds. And we wanted to make sure you knew that because we keep hearing rumors about that, but that is not the case. We conducted the audit to increase visibility and accuracy in our finances to support sound financial decision-making. We have achieved that goal and have the financial accounting information we need to build our next budget and plan for our future. We also have a final draft of our new financial policies and procedures to ensure we can maintain sound financial management now and into the future. On the budget, we are on track to meet our budget goals. We do need everyone to keep up with the pledge commitments. If you want to add more, that's okay too. Let's see, the board continues to be mindful of all expenditures in order to reduce where we can our planned reserve spending of that $35,000. So right now, that $35,000 is being planned to be used if we need it, and we're trying not to do that as much as we can. Available cash today is $79,872, and that's a healthy position. Total investment reserves, UUA, Fidelity, and Vanguard total. Our current investment reserves continue to perform well, and we will be providing more information on the investments in subsequent reports. And then the other thing that we have a lot of questions about, oh, and one more thing. She said the pledge relative to the budget is on target. So, minister search. So I just wanted to go back over the differences between the types of ministers so that people are not kind of confused about what's happening here. There's interim minister, and that we had when we had Minister Steve Furr. It's a specifically trained minister to help a congregation assess itself and prepare for full-time ministry. Then we have our called settled minister, which Jason was, a full-time employee with a benefits package. What we are looking at right now is a contract minister who provides specific ministerial services for a limited number of hours per week for an agreed upon period of time. In our case, a half-time minister at 20 hours a week for a 1-year contract that can be extended as needed. There's no benefit package as far as housing or insurance other than the state-required SGI. So that's kind of where, that's kind of the differences and why we're not going to be doing a called minister right now. We do not have the funds to have a called minister. So we are trying to stay within the budget, and we are going with a contract minister, and we will keep with a contract minister until we are at a point where we can call a minister again. Let's see, the timeline and the process that we're in, we first had to determine a budget because we couldn't put anything out there if we didn't know what we could pay them. So the congregation approved that budget September 22nd. We need to submit all the procedural paperwork to UUA for posting, and if you've ever worked on a search committee, you know that there's a lot of that, and we are just about complete with that and hope to get that all posted this week. What happens is according to the UUA, most of the UU ministers search between December and April, so we're right on time to get that in there. Let's see, then once we've gotten applicants, we will do interviews, and then we need to do a background check, and then we would hire a contract minister for a 1-year period, which is renewable. So that's kind of where we're at right now. Our goal is to get a contract minister hired in the next quarter, so somewhere between January and March. The sooner the better, and I think everybody kind of agrees with that. And just kind of as a comparison, searching for and selecting a called minister takes about a year. So I think we're doing pretty good. All right, thank you guys.
For those joining us online, you are invited to share in all caps a joy or sorrow in the comments section. I'll have Rose light a candle for those sharing in general. And If you're in the sanctuary, we have one joy and sorrow, which is Bruce Reback. He can come up and light his own candle if you'd like. So I'm going to ask Rose to light the first sorrow candle for the larger world, for our wish for peace and justice, and hopes that children who will inherit the planet will do okay with that. May this candle represent all these wishes and calls to action. Okay. So Mary's going to, there's a joy online from Megan Smock celebrating her new cat, Sterling. Her cat's name is Sterling. And that's all. Bruce Reebok has a joy. It's the 50th anniversary of his bar mitzvah. Now we light one more candle for all the joys and concerns and sorrows that remain unexpressed, but are still held close to our hearts. Please join in saying the joy and sorrow affirmation. We join you in celebrating your joys. May you feel our love and compassion for your sorrows and concerns. For all that is spoken and unspoken, may the caring community sustain us all.
Let us move into the spirit of meditation, reflection, and prayer. You may close your eyes, take a deep breath, whatever helps you find your center. Love requires us to take risks and even be controversial. The sobering reality is that some individuals may be beyond our reach, bitterness or selfishness blocking them from being responsive to our efforts to restore compassion. Our focus, then, can't be on those who resist love. Instead, we must channel our energies toward cultivating a culture of love, a culture that transcends barriers and touches the lives of all we can reach.
This reading is an excerpt from the UU Association's article on justice inclusion. Unitarian Universalists put our faith into action. Our justice efforts are grounded in our congregationally driven social justice statements and our call to break down divisions, heal isolation, and honor the interconnectedness of all life and justice issues. We model these commitments by creating just, welcoming, and inclusive congregations. Our work for a better world calls us to unexpected places as we harness love's power to stop oppression.
In April 2023, at the Camp de Benneville Pines Annual Assembly, The tribal chair, Mona Olivas Tucker of the Atikchu Tikchu tribe in San Luis Obispo, part of the northern Chumash indigenous people, gave a heartfelt talk. Mona described the indignities she suffered growing up in San Luis Obispo County, such as the systemic racism in government, institutions, and economic opportunities, as well as the cultural attitudes of white settlers. In spite of this, she was able to persevere and retire from a successful career as a real estate broker. The indignity she suffered included people saying to her that there are no northern Chumash indigenous people left. She explained, sometimes to people who would not listen, that she is living proof that these indigenous people are still here. The cultural norm for indigenous people included intertribal celebrations of song and dance, ceremonies held in semi-subterranean roundhouses that went on all night, celebrating the harvest and the change of seasons. In California, the onslaught went from Spanish missions, Mexican rancheros, to the Anglos. Each of these invaders made the practice of indigenous celebrations illegal in different ways. Indigenous people persevered, carrying forward traditions and rituals established before the invaders arrived. In 2015, during his visit to the United States, Pope Francis canonized Junipero Serra, who founded 9 missions between San Diego and San Francisco. Serra's sainthood sparked controversy. Indigenous people collectively remember how the Catholic missions engineered the enslavement, genocide, and assimilation of the state's first people. It was not until 2017 when the California Department of Education removed from its curriculum the requirement for all 4th graders to build a model mission. A new paper titled "We Are the Land" reveals the previously suppressed history of California. This paper by Damon Akins and William Bauer Jr. reinstates many forgotten moments to the rich historical record of indigenous peoples' intergenerational struggle. They write of the Ipai people in the 1500s and 1600s defending their fisheries and exacting tribute from Spanish sailors in San Diego Bay. Atkins and Bauer write of the coordinated Chumash Yokuts revolt in 1824, when the natives burned Mission Santa Ynez to the ground, forced the garrison at Mission La Purísima to surrender, and captured Mission Santa Barbara. Between 1848 and 1860, the California Indian population collapsed, falling from an estimated 150,000 to just 30,000. In 2019, Governor Gavin Newsom issued an official apology to Native people for the state's history of wrongdoing and established a Truth and Healing Council that aims to reconcile the state with its tribes. It's called a genocide, Newsom said at a ceremony to consecrate the council. That's what it was, a genocide. No other way to describe it. And that's the way it needs to be described in the history books. I'm sorry on behalf of the state of California. I'm sorry that we've had generations, your kids and grandkids, your ancestors, that had to suffer through the indignities, lack of capacity and empathy and understanding, their lives lost, their lives diminished, and the incapacity of the rest of us to fully grasp the magnitude of what we in the state did to your ancestors. In some parts of California, local people, organizations, and governments have tried to make things right by returning land, with parts of Big Sur, Inyo County, and Eureka going back to the tribes from whom they were taken. Atkins and Bauer chronicled the centuries-long efforts of indigenous people to hold on to the places their forebears toiled and fought to protect against waves of Spanish, Russian, Mexican, and American colonization that crested in genocide. Ultimately, the stories that Atkins and Bauer gathered are about the natives themselves, offering a compassionate reading of a people. The details and voices of California Indians' lives that the authors amplify from oral histories, primary documents, and secondary sources draw out the drama and recast the history of the 31st state from the perspectives of the first people. California was an abundant, diverse, and even magical place before it was invaded. In the 1700s, there were hundreds and thousands of natives, perhaps even more than 1 million, speaking more than 100 languages, making the region one of the most populous and diverse north of the Rio Grande. The stories indigenous peoples told narrated the creation of their world and rooted them in their homelands. The Esalen indigenous people on the Central Coast told stories about how to live off the fat of the land and the sea, the seaweed, abalone, mussels, rabbits, deer, elk, and of course, acorns. There are 15 species of acorns in this state, and the nut was a staple for many tribes. Many of these stories, bridging spiritual and physical worlds, were accompanied by song, dance, and ceremony. In the Siskiyou Mountains in the northwest, Yurok, Karaks, and Tolowas danced as part of their various world renewal ceremonies every year. I love the idea of a world renewal ceremony. In 1806, a measles outbreak infected some 800 indigenous people in San Francisco, killing 337. With such high death rates at the missions, the Spanish raided inland indigenous communities to sustain the workforce and population of their settlements. Missionaries in San Francisco attacked and kidnapped members of the Huichin villages in what is now Berkeley, Oakland, and Pleasanton. The missions were deadly, brutal, and authoritarian places. Americans typically date the beginning of their reign in California to January 24th, 1848, when John Sutter struck gold on the American River. But this story of migration and sudden fortune, like so many other tales of the United States' pioneering origins, directs attention away from the actions that actually yoked the Golden State to the Union, namely an expansionary war against Mexico and a genocide of indigenous peoples. When miners first descended on Sutter's Find along the American River in 1848, about half were indigenous, and many were women who repurposed their traditional baskets to pan for gold. The coil and weave of the fibers were well suited for snagging gold flakes. Indigenous miners, and especially the women, were vulnerable to violence, exploitation, outright enslavement, as well as bitter racism of the goldfields. In primary documents, Atkins and Bauer come across American settlers bragging about the way they took advantage of Indians by trading cheap goods for gold of equal weight. They cheated native miners by using lead slugs called diggers' ounces. The term digger was a racial slur that referred to indigenous root digging practices and intentionally rhymed with another epithet. Dehumanization wrought mass violence almost immediately. In 1849, a group of prospectors from Oregon arrived at the site of Sutter's gold strike and tried to rape some Nisenan women. After the Nisenan exacted retribution, the miners went on a killing spree, slaughtering more than 100 Nisenans in about a month. Other California Indians soon began to fear the gold fields and fight back against their exploitation. When, in 1850, American ranchers threatened to send a group of Eastern Pomo slaves off to Sutter's Mill, the indigenous slaves turned on and killed their captors. The U.S. military responded swiftly, ordering 75 soldiers to exterminate, if possible, the rebels. California lawmakers soon formalized these acts of ethnic cleansing into what the historian Benjamin Madley has described as a killing machine. In 1850, the California legislature passed the Indian Act, which effectively legalized indigenous slavery by allowing settlers to take indigenous vagrants, fugitives, and debtors captive. In the first decade of U.S. rule, Californians subjugated as many as 20,000 Native Indians, including 4,000 children as farmhands, domestic servants, and sex slaves. State-sponsored militias received more than $1 million from the state in the 1850s and 1860s, and they murdered 10,000 indigenous people. Elected officials praised these murders as pedagogic killing that taught the natives a lesson. One such slaughter in 1853, about 475 Talawas were murdered in cold blood in the middle of the night at a Smith River village called Yantakit, which means center of the world in the Tolowa language. The Tolowa had gathered there to celebrate their biannual World Renewal ceremony. In a secret session in 1852, the U.S. Senate rejected the treaties with indigenous people, buried the documents in legislative archives, and prohibited their publication. Then, the United States attempted to round up and confine all California Indians to just 5 reservations. As California Indians were displaced and dispossessed in the late 1800s and early 1900s, settlers and industrialists transformed their homelands. Dams erected in mountains and foothills altered the flow of rivers to form irrigation networks that drained deltas and wetlands. In 1858, armed citizens relocated Yokuts from Tulare Lake, the largest freshwater lake west of the Great Lakes, on which the tribe had relied for water and food for more than 10,000 years. By the 1870s, agriculture had turned the lake putrid and salty. In the early years of the 1900s, Charles Kelsey, a San Jose attorney hired by the Northern California Indian Association, found references to the secret treaties signed by California Indians. Across the state, Indians organized themselves. It took them more than 2 decades to get their day in court, but in 1928, Congress passed an act enabling the Indians of California, a new legal term defined as all indigenous peoples residing in the state in 1852, to sue the federal government for lost treaty lands. California Indians won the case, but the government did not give these lands back, nor did it significantly compensate tribes for their losses. A new lawsuit that focused on dispossessed indigenous lands not covered by the treaties was launched in 1946. California Indians eventually won that case as well, and in 1972, California Indians received a paltry $700 each for their losses. By the time that case was settled, California Indians had new in-state indigenous allies, Native Americans who had relocated from other reservations from across the country to cities like Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Oakland. In 1969, a diverse coalition of student activists and Indians, many of whom came from outside of the state, occupied the former federal prison of Alcatraz Island, bringing national attention to treaty rights of indigenous people. This pressured the federal government to embrace a new era of Indian policy based on self-determination rather than termination. In 2019, the city of Eureka returned just over 200 acres on Indian Island to the Wiyot tribe. Even though their sovereign legal status and language were gone, the Wiyot were not. California indigenous peoples' most lasting legacies, however, are political, social, and environmental. Their traditions of place-based and world renewal celebrations provide an enduring spirit of indigenous empowerment. These currents have not only carried First Peoples through the genocidal abyss, but also continue to shape progressive politics. We progressive people must learn from indigenous people how to survive the resurgence of authoritarianism. Whether Californians realize it or not, They will likely embrace more, not less, of the governance systems and lifeways of Indigenous peoples in the coming years as they adapt to a rapidly warming world. Indigenous people naturally take care of the land that is their home. There are thousands of people who live in their lands now, and so now that you live in these lands, it is also your responsibility to take care of this land, because this land also takes care of you.
The ritual of breaking bread together has been shared by the human family in various forms for millennia. Giving thanks for the harvest, praying that the earth will sustain life. In almost all cultures, bread is considered a staple food. Bread provides more than physical sustenance. We use the phrase breaking bread to indicate the sharing of a meal with someone. In a spiritual and social sense, bread binds us together in our humanity and offers a sense of community. This morning, we celebrate a tradition in this congregation, the bread communion. Please come up to near the Christmas tree where the bread is and take a moment to experience a wonderful piece of bread, its color, texture, aroma, and taste the feel of it as you bite into it. You may go ahead and come forward as you feel empowered. This bread is a symbol of all that sustains us, our individual bodies, our family traditions, our community here at UUCF, and the world beyond. Let us sustain our culture of love by sharing in this bread communion. In this holiday season, let us be thankful for bread, for sharing food, for life, for memories, and our UU values that sustain and bind us together. Thank you, Rose. Sunday is an opportunity to recommit to each other and this place of gathering. It is as much a ritual as our bread communion, lighting our chalice, and reciting our unison affirmation. It is a reminder that one type of love is generosity. This time of offering is how we show that we believe it is important to worship together and to help our community and to say yes to the values of our faith.
For our closing hymn, we'll be singing hymn number 21, For the Beauty of the Earth. Please rise in mind, body, or spirit and join us in singing.
For the beauty of the earth, for the splendor of the skies, for the love which from our birth over and around us lies, source of all to thee praise. This our hymn of grateful praise. For the joy of clear dark, for the earth provides delight, for the mystic harmony, linking sense to sound and sight. Source of all to thee praise. This our hymn of grateful praise. For the wonder of each hour of the day and of the night, and tree and flower, sun and moon and stars of light, source of all to thee praise. This our hymn of grateful
Today, our caring listeners are Patrick Mannion and Ellie Searle. You may speak with Pat or Ellie after the service if you have any concerns or if you'd simply like to speak with someone. When you talk to a caring listener, what you say is always confidential. Please join hands if you wish. We have to be careful to recognize tactics authoritarians use, just as sporadic encounters of indigenous people discovered European sojourners and provided opportunities for each party to understand and misunderstand each other. We on this colonized land randomly encounter people supporting authoritarian tactics. It is our responsibility in displaying and discussing our values to try to understand people whose wavelength is different from ours. Refrain from amplifying fear and hate. Be calm and persistent in talking about interdependence, love, generosity, pluralism, justice, equity, and transformation. We now extinguish this chalice, but not the light of truth, the warmth of the community, and the fire of commitment. After our closing song, you're invited to join us in person or online for our respective social hours. The fire of commitment we carry in our hearts wherever we may go. Amen. Shalom. Salam. Namaste. And blessed be. Now let's sing our song, Go Now in Peace. Now in peace. Go now in peace. May the spirit of love surround